we will just carry on. And I have some also some slides here, also some things that I printed out of the book that I thought were important, and I'll share those on kind of discussion points. Valuable, so I want to make sure everyone is covered with it. So I also wanted to make sure that that you knew that there's what's called the consideration set and the evoke set. And we talk about the consideration set, but it's important to understand that the evoke set, the consideration set is the final one. The evoke set are the ones that we can think of right off the top of our head. And I wanted to make sure I had those clear before I went on further. We talked about the factors that affect the consumer buying process. They talked about these four, but we're going to also break those down a little bit further as well, so that we have a better idea of some of the particular things that consumers use when they're coming up with making their choices. What are the factors that are influencing consumers? It's important to look at them also and understand that some of those influences are internal to us, such as our motives and our interests and our attitudes and opinions. And then also there are outside influences that affect how we make our decisions as well. The most important outside influence that determines our purchasing decisions is our family. Family is how we learn, understand the world, their eyes. It is not surprising that when you see consumer products being advertised in commercials, there will be 2 generations, if not 3 generations, of individuals there, whether they're debating for the product or against it, matter, right? Family will be there until you make, I don't know, let me also say this. Did anyone have their parents help them with their first insurance? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's natural. I mean, the first car you usually drive is going to be your parents'. And the first thing your parents are going to do is, well, I have to call the insurance guy so that you're on there just in case you haven't got help. So that's the first influence. The first thing you buy for yourself in independence might be your clothes, but the next thing is going to be your car. Car is going to be driven not by your family, literally and figuratively, but it's also going to be from social pressure, especially with Europe. No doubt about it. I mean, why wouldn't you? Like I said before, no one is going to jump in a minivan if you were to complete the MBA. You're not. So, what are situational influences? What are things local to yourself that might cause you to make different? Well, these are some of the situational influences. I'm sorry if this is not easier to see. I apologize. If I can make it a little bit bigger. But these are the situational influences that it goes through the consumer process and ultimately how those influences translate. So as I said before, my dissertation was on retail atmospherics, but my retail atmospherics also was coupled with another paper by a gentleman or 2 gentlemen by the name of Kaplan and Kaplan. And they talked about how outside, how places in natural areas, including the woods and those kind of places, not only help us to recover a cognitive balance, but they can make life-changing experiences. And a lot of that has to do with how we absorb those particular things. One of the things that I dealt with was fascination, which is the ability to absorb an atmospheric in an effortless manner. And what it does is it helps us to restore cognitive balance. Our short-term memory is generally fixed and finite. And what happens when we overload our fixed-term memory, our short-term memory, is that is the cause of stress. And the way that we reduce stress is we go into an area that is both escapist, that gets us out of the area that we're in, and fascinating in ways that it appeals to us in an effortless manner. So physical and spatial influences, how crowded a place is. Oh my God, that is a huge, huge influence on the way we vibe. So comfortable atmosphere or ambience promotes lingering and browsing. We know that the longer that a consumer is there, the more appeal or possibility we will buy things. Crowded stores may cause customers to leave, buy less because we sit out. Shopping in groups is a big one, especially for certain influences. Has anyone been with a friend trying on a wedding dress? Was it just you and her?
No,
How many more?
5, 6.
Five,
yeah.
yes, exactly. And places like Dave's Bridal Shop encourages those things because the social influences helps them to make the decision process. So was it Dave's Bridal?
I'm sorry,
Was it Dave's Bridal Shop or?
I've been there as well. yeah.
Okay, so she puts on a wedding dress and where does she go? I mean,
She stands right in the center by the mirrors.
the mirrors. And so the mirrors are all the way around her, right? And not only that, but she's on a pedestal, isn't she? She's above that, okay? All of those things make sense. Did you have champagne while you were there?
No.
Okay. Usually they offer you champagne. So the reasons I kind of put these things all together is that you have physical, spatial influences and social and interpersonal ones. And all of those things help to create a satisfaction ultimately when you're going to buy your dress. I think if you ask Dr. Allinson, ask her how many dresses she bought for her wedding. How many she bought, okay? You know, and let her.
More
explain.
than one, I assume.
Oh, yeah,
Wow.
okay. I'll let her answer the question. Just say your husband asked you how many did you buy? Okay. Temporal influences, I talked about, we are under a time poverty. We lack the time to be able to make decisions. And when we have short-term timing, we also, the need or the concerns about money fade away. You tend to look for the most convenient place to buy it. You generally are not shopping, so you're not worried about whether or not it's the right occasion or not. You simply get it and go out. Special occasions naturally loosen us up to be the willingness to buy more. Oh my God. Anyway, but those are also ones. And then last, the consumer dispositional influences, how they feel at the moment, certainly contribute contribute to either success or failure in buying those items. The situational influences are important and they ultimately frame whether we are successful in being able to complete our journey for the buying process or whether that unfortunately gets disjointed or dysfunctional. I thought it was important for marketing. So, physical, spatial, social, and interpersonal, and temporal as well. And so the task and then the consumer dispositional, all of those are common situations. We're not going to worry about buyer behavior in business. You can speed through that unless you like to see those. Now we're going to start talking about market segmentation and the actual thought. Now we've gone pretty much ahead of this in certain ways, but we're going to revisit it again. And we're going to talk about segmentation. Segmentation is the process of taking the total market and dividing it into groups that are homogeneous sections or groups. And as I talked about before, the groups should be similar to each other, but dissimilar from other groups. And they should be substantiated usually through good market research, where you do things like a confirmatory factor analysis, where they separate into amazingly neat columns if the research is done right. As I've said before, they need to be similar to each other, which is collectively exhaustive, everything that it is, and then mutually exclusive or dissimilar, or nothing that it isn't, right? It involves a very fundamental decision whether or not we should segment at all. Why would we not market segment, especially in an era of fragmentation as we have? The reason that we wouldn't is that our particular product appeals to the mass audience, all for the same criteria and the same reason. It is a very difficult segment, because generally, of course, the past assumption is that you are going to have a segmented market, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the mass market doesn't exist. And so I bring up Coke, which is an item that appeals generally to everyone in the same way, but it's also because Coke has a certain limited number of satisfying benefits that consumers have. Generally, cold, or it should be. It has an appeal taste that generally consumers, whether they like them or not, it's generally the taste that says it or not. And of course, especially after playing football for 3 hours, it was cold, which is the most important thing for all. The interesting thing is that Coke was one of those products that always failed consumer taste tests. Matter of fact, it used to drive Coke crazy. In the 70s, Pepsi used to have the Pepsi Challenge, in which blind taste tests between Pepsi and Coke, variably what happened was the research found that Pepsi was preferred. And in a blind taste test, I would say, of course. One of the things about Coke, if I'm a loyal Coke drinker, although I don't drink it as much, because I'm trying to stay away from those things, but Coke has a bitter black cherry taste to it. If you're a loyal Coke drinker, you insist on it. It's a good taste to you, and you're used to it. If I don't find that, then it's either going to be an RC or it's going to be a Pepsi. But in a blind taste test where you don't have the black cherry and the sugar count is slightly ahead or slightly higher, you're going to choose Pepsi every time. Like I said, it drove the corporate upstairs crazy. And so they were going to find a way to fix this. Didn't need to fix it. Okay. So they did about 50,000 individuals were tested and sampled as they changed the taste of Coke so that it could actually beat Pepsi in a taste test. And you can look it up. There's a great article by Belk, I believe, called Coke and Its Fizz. And it talked about the disaster that New Coke was. In 6 weeks, New Coke was pulled. Pepsi basically won the game for about 6 weeks. They had at least a percentage or two advantage over Coke. Reason, quite simply, is that they did not test loyal Coke drinkers. They tested the general population. And the general population who are not loyal Coke drinkers prefer something else. So, failure to recognize your significant market segmentation ultimately is what brought Coke to where it was. And now they're talking about pulling Coke Zero because Coke Zero is taking the market away from Diet Coke. Coke Zero has the same market share that regular Coke has now. It is a winner of a product, but this is the same reasoning, by the way, that made Microsoft decide we don't want to sell this courier because it would hurt our current existing users of to each his own. So, what's the first way? Mass market. There's no segmentation. Targeting requires an undifferentiated approach. In other words, there is one single mass segment. And when the entire market is similar, the undifferentiated marketing works. It has enormous advantages. You have one message across all of the mass marketing that you have. So the traditional advertising with video, with audio, all of those can be the same thing in the same message. You save a lot of money. Lower your market costs. Production means you just keep those things running out. But it means that you're giving up some significant portion of the market to your competitors because you're quite simply saying, this is good enough. Which of course we know that Coke does not have just Coke. We have Coke Zero, we have Diet Coke, we have Cherry Coke, we have all of the other Cokes that we want to think of. We have different sizes which appeal. So by the way, the most appealing size now is the 8-ounce, smaller one, for a couple of reasons. One of them, it hits that magic under 100 calorie mark. And we also know that by research that the first sip that we have of a Coke is much more appealing than the very last one. So what happens is consumers, instead of a single 20-ounce bottle, will drink 2 8-ounces and they'll achieve a greater satisfaction and value because we have 2 brand new sips. The world works. The next is differentiated marketing. And this is where you basically have different markets. You accept that markets become fragmented. And this is where we talked about our bicycle segmentation that we did. So here we go. We have bicycles for exercise, recreation. We have save money. We have, oh gosh, transportation. And let's just leave those 4 right there. We can take the very same item and by multi-segmenting, go after all 4 markets and not change the product at all. Because what we focus on is the appeal of those particular groups. And so we attract buyers from more than one segment. We even might have a variety of products, but then again, we might have the same product just for different purposes. Realize we can have different products and different markets, and that's how the whole marketing segment stuff works. We can focus on a given market that says we're going to work in this particular industry of the use of bicycles, okay? We can have different products and say we'll have a competition bike, we'll have a recreation bike, we'll have kids bikes. And so what we can have is a multi-mix of all of those together. And this is an example of a marketing concentration because it's the same product used 4 different ways. We can decide instead of worrying about all that other stuff, let's just look at one well-defined market. Niche marketing is also called customized marketing. It can be. It means this is that we have decided that our particular product is so valuable in this one market that consumers will pay a high price for that product, especially because it matches a very set of unique needs. Those needs are so valued to the individuals that they will pay whatever to go above and beyond because it matches exactly what the consumers wish. It also means that the corporations that do niche marketing must have a laser-like focus on the consumers in that market and to know exactly in intimate detail what they desire in their particular items. Niche marketing also, in many ways, demands that you have to know in niche marketing You have to know, always be ahead of the customers in their needs. You also have to have command a substantial market share in order to be able to achieve. Is the tail chasing the dog. Got to be able to know your consumers. Consumers research as a viable product, and that it is a constantly circulating success story. Finally, we get down to one-on-one marketing, which is where you have an entirely unique product for each customer. Usually you're looking at substantially big customers, usually in not necessarily just one product, but that particular product or that item is so specialized that you tweak that system to be anything that the consumers. We'll talk about high-end, MRIs. There are now side MRIs, open MRIs. These are MRIs that you don't have to climb in a tunnel and listen to music while this thing's pounding in your eardrums. And every one of those is developed uniquely for every hospital that they go into. One-on-one marketing could include tax services, legal services. It really moves into the area of services, especially when those goods are intangible. How many of you go to one person to cut your hair and no one else? Oh, yeah. And that's one of those things also that money doesn't mean anything. I mean, I could go to Sport Clips or whatever and spend $30 less. Hell, I mean, I'm not going to do it. I mean, it means that so much to me. And that is a one-on-one marketing appeal. Kind of think it. The last is a mass customization, which is that you have unique solutions to customers in a mass level. And the other thing about that is it's more of an option variety versus custom fitting something down to the last settings. One-on-one would be also software that you, in essence, write yourself that is different from everyone else. Mass customization, the example, of course, started with Burger King, where Burger King said, jingle, hold the pickle, hold the lettuce, special orders, don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us have it your way. Anyway, you're not going to put spinach on it, okay? And they're not going to run out and get pineapple for it. It's whatever's in the house. This is what mass customization is. It's kind of an extension, but it's just a little bit tweaky in that. Yes, whatever's in the house, okay? So these are the segmentation approaches from a mass customized down to the individual's satisfaction of a particular. Just a little talk about permission marketing, which basically tries to solve the problem of being bombarded by every kind of email that you can think of. Permission marketing allows the customer to choose to become part of that firm's target market. Usually what you'll have is that in the first purchase, they'll give away some substantial discount so that they can get your email. And if they really work hard and give you a big discount, they'll get you a phone number. Okay. The advantage is that customers are usually interested in the product offering from the very beginning. And so consumers like it. The disadvantage, of course, is after your 12,000th email in the last week, you're done, okay? Which is one of the reasons why I take Google Mail, because I can automatically hit unsubscribe and it gets me out. There's still a substantial number of that. The problem with permission marketing, of course, is that it just becomes spam. You know, you just get tired of it. So permission marketing usually is best for single occasions, but it doesn't mean that it's best for everything. So what are the successful ways in which segmentation can succeed. There are 4 rules that we have to live by. First, you must be able to identify the size of the market itself. Sounds self-explanatory, but you would not believe how many products are launched in without ever really knowing the size of the market. And if you don't know the size of the market, sometimes you can underestimate it. So Skechers is one of those unique products that basically came about through psychographic research. And so along with Skechers into other things was the whole concept of, this is back in the 90s, whether or not these kids that are on skateboards that have these strange clothes, whether it's big enough for us to even care about. So they basically studied it. And then what they did was called exactly what is, we'll talk about psychographic research as well, which is basically sitting and watching what people do in their normal day. And so they would go out, watch these individuals on their skateboards, and that they found, especially in larger areas, there were substantial numbers that they did not even conceive. And so they started coming out with product lines that appealed to that group, and they were enormously successful. Hot Topic is one of those very rare corporations that not only is able to accomplish this, but they're even able to do it for fads. And so the definition of what a fad is something that is appealed where the maximum lifespan is around 6 weeks. Well, the fashion industry generally plans its year out. And so that the fashions that are in stores right now are generally for 6 weeks ahead. And so you find in March, they've already started their Easter clothes. And now what you're going to see is that clothes for the summer are already there. The very rigid planning structure. What Hot Topic did was blow that all away and say, we can come up with designs in less than a week and have them on the shelves. And they do it brilliantly. They've really nailed their particular market pitch. And it can be the hottest seller one day and in the discount bin the very next. And they've been able to make a market out of this in a really different marketing plan, and it's succeeded. Well, along with that identifiable thing, especially with the kids on the skateboards and the Hot Topic groups, is it's substantial. And so what the substantial means is that it was large enough to generate profits that would, or let's just say, meet or even exceed expectations. Substantial means simply that, is that I can profit off of this particular size. I might be able to identify it and I might be able to measure it, but if we're only talking about several thousand, a large organization simply can't put their money into something that size. Accessible and responsive kind of go together. So accessible means my message can reach them. This used to be dramatically more difficult, especially in the time when no one had a mobile phone, and now everybody. So accessible means that my particular market segment I can reach, and responsive also means that they can reach to me and that they will receive the message in accessible, and they can return the message back with inquiries back to us. And so accessible, I can reach them. Responsive means they can reach me. Except for Hot Topic, which is sustainable and viable, are very important segments, are very important reasons. There is no reason to continue in a particular industry if you can't sustain the effort. So I don't know about you, but I love Krispy Kreme. I mean, they're awesome, but they're off my list right now. But after Easter, I'll start eating them again. But the problem with Krispy Kreme as a franchise and with a food group is that generally we look at them as a treat, but we don't look at them as a treat once every 2 days. Quite simply, at some point the message is shoving the sugar in your body. It's not maybe the greatest thing. Just say to yourself, well, I have a dozen. And you might say, you know, in a month, well, I'll have another dozen. But to sustain the effort of constantly buying Krispy Kreme week after week, is very difficult. Need a substantial market segment to have it. They were in boom for 4 years, I think, or 5, there's a bank. They were in Lenore, for at least a year and a half. And now the closest one is Hickory. And quite simply, it needs a 5-county population area of 300,000 to be able to, you know, consistently use that and have it as a success. Some products are not sustainable. Give Hot Topic credit, they're the ones that recognize it. The things you want to avoid is things that are sensitive, ethically sensitive, and very slim on the legalities. But even those things kind of change. I mean, 5 years ago, we would even heard of gummies. You know, I wouldn't have. I use CBD, by the way, for my knee pains. You know, and I've got to avoid to be careful about those because sometimes, you know, they get into the Delta 8 category. But you have to be very sensitive to your population and respect those individuals as well. Also, why are you into a market segment where you can get arrested? And then finally, to have segments that don't match your firm's expertise. So, Godiva wanted to do a deal with SlimFast. No, Jenny Craig. So they put together a product. Jenny Craig and Godiva, and neither of them could market it because the other's market segment totally was mismatched. Neither side could be able to find any kind of success. And so unfortunately, it was a nice idea, but quite simply, it didn't match the expertise of the firm. That's also one of the things that gets corporations in trouble when they forget what's the reason they're in business for. And this is a very marketing myopia thing, is that they try to think that their appeal is into something else when in essence, they've never had the correct vision to begin with. And so these are the criteria for successful segmentation. Now, how do you go about doing this? How do you go about the process of segmentation? The first thing you do is you identify the relative characteristics of that particular market or the market segment. And so the first thing you do is you do your research, you look at how the segments come, and then you look at the criteria within the research that you've done to come up with or consider the important relevant characteristics. Many times there will be a correlation, like 80% of the people in this particular group have this, but it's not causation. That particular segment is not what drives the success. So when you're identifying your consumer groups, that's one of those things that you think about when you're doing your situation analysis. But we also got to realize that the target moves. You can find that particular program elements don't work anymore because we can no longer define who our ideal market segment is. Realize that the target market we're going after and the marketing program that we use to be able to get those consumers are independent. And many times what can happen is we can have the target market fundamentally shift in one way or another. And our marketing program is going after the traditional market segment, and that segment is either changed or completely gone. What are the relevant characteristics of the market segment, ones that appeal, that we can hopefully find a way driving to them to achieve some points. And so let's go out of this, go back to and columns in the book. And we're going to talk about the common segmentation variables that we use when we are developing our market segment. We think of the three biggest ones of being behavioral, demographic, and psychographic. But geographic also has a way of bending those rules depending on the locations that we're in. And so the first is behavioral segmentation, and these wrap around the benefits that are sought, how the consumers use their product, and then how sensitive they are to a price. How do we actually use the product? And so the benefits sought, such as, does it enhance our image? If I were to buy a vehicle, does it appeal to me in a certain individual way? Jennifer Acker came up with brand personalities, which basically state that brands have personalities like human beings do, and that those personalities appeal to us, and we try to gather around them. And so like one of them was the characteristic of ruggedness. And so if I were to say, is there a brand that is rugged? You might think of Jeep or Harley Davidson. If we were to think of sophistication, we would think of Omega watches or any of the others. Those are examples. So the benefit that you ask for is valued. How do we use the product? Remember, the 80-20 rule generally is firm in just about anything we sell. 20% of the consumers bring us 80% of the profits. Generally the way it works. We try to track those the 20-80 rules, which is one of the other reasons why I have subscription services, so that we know how consumers ideally use our. We try to look at what unique situations the consumers are purchasing those particular items for. And then we try to base the goods that we sell around that. What are the three most important days of the year where consumers buy the most flowers?
Valentine's Day. Mother's Day.
2, and a lesser extent, Easter. 3. When do we buy the most chocolate? 2 times.
Valentine's Day.
Halloween, got it. Right. Those times of the behaviors are ultimately how we drive businesses and how businesses are able to sell their goods at the moments that they want to, and this is a behavior. Demographic segmentation are any statistic that can be listed generally around consumers and their families. It does not specifically nail things to a T to know exactly the age, the income, the gender, and the education, but it helps us to steer where those consumers are, especially when it's in a life cycle. Life cycles are very valuable. If you are a family or have a family, the child does a lot of the decision helping. Women buy 70% of all retail in the United States. Understand those things, you know who you have to make the pitch or appeal to. Women are the toughest consumers there are, not about it. They ask questions, they expect answers. You're not going to just simply make genuine, general appeals unless you keep those facts in mind. The most powerful segmentation is psychographic. Psychographic groups consumers by what's known as AIO, attitudes, opinions, and interests. They include personalities, lifestyles, and motives. But psychographics, when you group consumers, it crosses all lines of gender, of income, any demographic characteristic you wish. It is what appeals to me, what are my interests, and my personal opinions. Understand more, I'm the one wearing the Dragon Ball Z shirt. We did research, me and my wife and Unal, who you probably don't know, he was a chair here. And we did extensive research on tailgating. A lot of research. Yes, did research on it. And we found some very fascinating things in psychographics, and then also the way that the generations kind of band together. The two generations, the Gen Zs and the millennials, that group have a greater common interest in the experience in and of itself, regardless of even the game that's being played. They will enjoy just the experience in itself. If it rains, if it's difficult, they have a tendency to leave, but they all will find some other place where the situational influences are not as great. The boomers like myself and Gen Xers tend to be loyal. They tend to, well, not that the others aren't, but they dress themselves in similar colors. They are the ones in tailgating who have traditional setups. They tend to have their own pregame rituals in a specific manner. They tend to stay to the time where it's a day or two after. Those are psychographic research, but what we found is that it did not matter income, didn't matter gender, didn't matter anything else. That one particular age had a similar characteristic, but all of the rest of those things did not matter. They were joined by the commonality of wanting to be able to see their team beat their opponent and enjoy a drink and have a good time at the same psychographic. And then finally, geographic. Geographic is just as it says, because we find that cultural influences actually have lower cultural influences at the same time. That even within a city as small as Boone, that there are geographic differences, small slices that make consumers in those groups unique from each other. So I come from Mississippi. I grew up next to New Orleans. Mardi Gras was a way of life. Can't believe we don't get the day off here, but I gotta live with it. The interesting thing about Mardi Gras is that even Mardi Gras has their own different ways of practice. The Creole version, the urban one that is in the cities, is the one that we all know of, and that is the Mardi Gras with the large carnivals that have the parades, that have all of the associated things that we think of when we think of Mardi Gras. In the rural countries, where we're talking about Gaydon and Kaplan and all of the smaller ones, we actually have a carnival that goes more to the traditional carnival that was in the Europeans in the 13th and 14th century. It is known as Corrida de Mardi Gras, which basically means it's the carnival that existed in Europe. Carnaval, by the way, means without meat. Carnaval, all right? And that the carnival and Mardi Gras evolved basically from the 40 days of Lent that was traditional within the Catholic Church. So one of the other basic things that would happen along the time is that for 40 days you fasted and you would not eat meat. Well, there was no refrigeration at the start for those 40 days. And so whatever foods you had to eat the day before. And so you had Carnival, which means without meat. You had Mardi Gras. You had Fat Tuesday, which meant that everything that could not survive would be eaten then, and that's what started the entire carnival season. So we are invested, and we have cultural things that influence our shopping and our behaviors, and then we even have subcultures, smaller things that change our behavior as well. All of these things need to be tracked. The fish sandwich comes from Louisiana, because Louisianians refused to eat meat on Friday. Of course, it's all changed now. But the fish sandwich came from a local McDonald's, moved up the chain. That's why we have them now. So these are the behavioral, the demographic, and psychographic ones. I thought that the sheet that I had probably did a better job of explaining it to you. And just to show this again, these are the common segmentation variables: behavioral, demographic, psychographic. Not worried about segmentation for businesses. And the last thing, well, second last thing, because we've got to talk about positioning. These are the strategies for you as a corporation when you are target marketing. If your firm has the specific needs of a particular market that it understands, that you can refine a product for a particular market and for customer satisfaction, that is a single market segment. It means I have one market and I have one product, and that appeals to that particular market such that I do not have to reach out to any more, and I'm able to achieve very much satisfaction from that particular group. Before they spread out, the Swiss Army knife was just one product, and it appealed to one market. And that would be an example, a product that is so unique and so specialized that it means basically that you could focus on that and achieve success. Selective targeting means that you can appeal to more than one market and one product. But what this also is a strong corporation that is so strong that it can appeal to the markets and products where the most profit is. If I'm Procter & Gamble, I am selling both Luvs diapers and Pampers at the same time. Diapers. How many different ways can you do diapers? And yet there is a significant market segment for each one, so that Procter & Gamble can be in that market, have two different products, and succeed. Laundry detergents, I've already talked about. There's 11 different laundry detergents that Procter & Gamble sells. And they can cherry pick which particular markets they think are the success, and they can hang on those and achieve enormous success. But the biggest, the most powerful corporations can target all markets and all products And these are the mass market targeting. They are able to serve all market segments with multiple products that they can achieve enormous success from. Product specialization means that there's one particular item that you have that there are multiple variations on that nothing can compete with. So one of my wonder drugs is Alka-Seltzer. So Alka-Seltzer works great, especially because Alka-Seltzer, as it's drunken, whatever you want to call it, hits the system within 30 seconds because it's absorbed through the stomach wall. That's why Alka-Seltzer works so well, especially for indigestion. Now, what the Alka-Seltzer people realized was that that is a delivery system where you don't have to stick yourself with something or swallow a pill. So what other ways can we achieve something with those particular products? Well, they came up with Alka-Seltzer cold medication. They came up with Alka-Seltzer nighttime cold medication. They came out with extra strength Alka-Seltzer medication, and they came up with Alka-Seltzer wake-up medication where you've gone on a bender and you need to be able to wake up fast. And that's exactly what it is. Different products for different reasons, but they specialize on that one particular product. The last is that market specialization where you have an intimate knowledge of one particular market and you develop all of your products around or appealing to that particular market. So I'm gonna go with Mardi Gras again. It's such a very narrow group. You know, you're talking about they make all of their products or make all of their income within a 30-day cycle. And yet you can go to the Mardi Gras stores and it is amazing the thousands of things that you can buy for that. And it's because they all appeal to that one particular market. And that market comes in and goes away by itself. Okay? What's the way that you determine whether you are targeting or whether you can do it? It is the firm's resources. What is the capabilities that your corporation has, both intellectual and physical? Can you exceed and excel in those given areas? So we have segmentation, where we define the variables. We have targeting, which is determining which of the markets we have based upon our firm's capabilities. And the last one we have is positioning, which is not in your book that I must explain now. And OC is so far ahead of me, I can't ask him why you didn't put position. Anyway, what is positioning? Okay. Positioning is a strategy that positions a brand or product in the consumer's mind here's a key phrase, relative to competition. Positioning is a strategy that positions a brand or a product in the consumer's mind relative to the competition. You must have positioning, otherwise your particular product is not considered a product, it's considered a commodity. It is no different than buying nails. Somebody name me a banana.
Soul.
Isn't it interesting you said the brand instead of the type of banana it is? That's an example of positioning. Very good. Del Monte, Dole. You think of those brands and not the of the banana itself. The banana, by the way, is called a Cavendish. There's something like 500 different kinds of bananas that are out there, and yet we position that banana as something unique and different, Chiquita, by giving it a brand name. Something as basic, ubiquitous as a banana. But we position that banana in our items as something unique and separate. Because once again, like everything else, there's only one way we make a choice. So we have to fight that. And one of the ways ultimately is that when we have a particular market segment, we understand the benefits, we decide which one of those to target. We have to target it with a message that is unique, different, and separate from the competition. So one of the great success stories in marketing, like beer. Breweries for decades were trying to market a low-calorie beer to consumers. If it were the 60s and I were looking at low-calorie beer, who would I think that would appeal to most? Yes, yes. The difficulty, of course, is that men consume 70% of the beer. And so how do we get light beer out there, but how do we appeal to men? Because one of the difficulties with low-calorie beer was that men considered it to not taste as good because all that they considered it was just watering the beer down. And that was one of the inherent disadvantages. And not only that, but they've got to come up with a way of making it appealing to men to be able to drink a light-calorie beer. Because calories, at some point, how much do they matter? So, the people at Miller, the people at Miller were trying to come up with a given concept. So, I had two questions. How to appeal to taste. How to appeal to calorie savings. So the first thing is, how do we appeal to taste? How do we convince men that it tastes just as great? So one of the ways that you do this is that you come up with a mantra or a slogan that determines or locks in what is called category membership. What we have to do is come up with an appeal that says that this particular item belongs to this group. In essence, what we have to do when appealing to two goods is create what's called a point of parity. Okay. But the other thing we have to do is we have to spell out what makes it unique. And how do I make calories unique enough to be able to have men desire it? So, I want them to drink beer. I want them to drink more beer. Got an idea. Instead of saying low calorie, how about if we say less filling? If we say the beer is less filling, what does it mean we get to do? Yes, we drink more beer. Now, who do we get to pass that message across? We have to have manly men, okay? We have to be able to have a group that is accepted by men to be able to have this message appeal and carry the message in a way that we respect. And so if we're talking about in the 70s, what we're looking at is tough guys who like light beer. And so what Miller Lite does was they start to sign up retired football players. The people that you knew in the NFL that are retired, that are respected and even feared. You can't use existing players who are playing because that's against the law. Yeah, in a way. So we had individuals, names of Dick Butkus. We had Bubba Smith. We had retired linebackers, L.C. Greenwood. These are guys that just evoked fear just in looking at them. And we allowed them to carry the message. And we came out with 2 slogans. Carry this and a brand mantra. So, 2 slogans we came up with was great taste, which determines category membership. It is a beer. And the next is less filling. We sewed it up together with a single brand mantra at the end that said, everything you always wanted in a beer. Less. That's how it all tied together. And I have one commercial I want to show you. You will. Okay. So this is it. So this is 2 gentlemen by the name of Dick Butkus and Bubba Smith, both retired. And so they're going into a bar. And I want you to listen for the messages that they're sending out, because these are the messages that position light beer as a manly drink.
Just a couple of animals who can only play football. We can be civilized too.
Tennis is sophisticated, but you still gotta be fast on your feet. So we still drink light beer from Miller. It's got a third less calories than the regular beer and it's less filling.
And it really tastes great.
Now that we've played singles, we're looking for a nice friendly game of doubles.
Tennis, anyone?
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer and less.
Fit. Brilliant. 30 seconds. They nailed everything. The positioning was perfect. Light beer actually challenged the regular beer almost for a decade. They went away from this message, but this is a successful example of positioning. Positioning creates a unique place in the consumer's mind relative to the competition, and they did it in a very successful way. This is the business end. This is the creative end of all marketing. Ability to come up with a message that speaks and is able to deliver the brand message in the better. So if you do the really good stuff, this is the stuff you can. Okay, we are finished with chapter 5. We will probably do some, we will be doing some case stuff next week. So I hope you all have a great weekend. Excuse me, Thursday, sorry, where was it? Thursday, we'll start doing casework. See you then.